how you pitch your business to investors. And I'll show you an actual real life example of how one of our startups from our last cycle, well-renowned format that we've pioneered in the acceleration space. And we're one of our key advantages that we're known for is how much we polish our founders when it comes to their ability to be able to pitch their business. And so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them towards the end once we get through the entire presentation. And so I'll just start by giving you a regional overview of FlatBLabs. So basically, we're the largest early stage venture capital company with an acceleration program in the Middle East and North Africa. We're set up in 7 locations. We've got over $85 million of assets under our management. We've got 8 seed funds and over 300 startups in our portfolio. We've conducted over 18 different varieties of startup programs. Some are similar to what we're doing in Bahrain. Other ones are more specific towards either pre-acceleration or sometimes just specific on a vertical, such as sustainability or fintech, for example. So the locations that were established in, it's originally first started in Egypt in 2011. And then we launched in Saudi Arabia in 2013, and then UAE in 2014, and then Tunisia and Lebanon both in 2017. And Bahrain is the most recent one, which is in 2018. And Jordan, we've set up the team in the office, but we'll be launching the official program in the second half of 2021. So how we support the startups, basically, we're an investment company, so we provide capital funding, and what we do is we do ticket sizes that are between $30,000 to $500,000, depending on the size and what kind of program it is, and we basically do capital for equity. So, for example, we give you a valuation, and then based on that valuation, we'll take the equivalent of the equity from the company, and that way our incentives are pretty much aligned. Our whole model is based on our success only comes through your success. And so we also have a support mechanism that goes with it, sort of similar to what the incubator is doing in University of Bahrain, but for later stage companies. So we have entrepreneurship development, we have regional exposure through our network. We have a comprehensive program that has over 200 mentors in it. None of this, because I get asked sometimes whether we charge or anything. We don't charge anything. This is just our way of supporting our invested companies. And so there's also commercial and legal support in forms of local registration and international registration. And then we help a lot on the fundraising support. So if any of you attended the session with Mahmoud yesterday, Mahmoud's role is he's our investments associate. And so he works with me on maintaining our portfolio of startups. And a lot of that is giving guidance and support, along with being able to set up business development meetings, and also being able to sort of raise follow-on funding for the companies so that they have a lengthy financial runway, and trying to get them to the Series A investors in the region. So along with that, there's also the product support, co-working spaces. We have one here in Bahrain at the MBB Tower. And we also give access to all our co-working spaces in the other locations that I mentioned previously. And we also support with hiring and helping in the filtration process of hiring talent. Recruitment, you'll find in startup, is one of the toughest parts of the business, and it's also one of the most crucial skills to have. So our portfolio, we've reached 314 startups. 60% of them are still active. 40% of them have secured follow-on funding, with a total of $53 million raised to date by them. And the average follow-on ticket size for companies that we've invested in ends up being $500,000. 33% of the founders are from beyond their local countries, and 22% are female-led. So just to give you an overview of what FlatBLabs Bahrain has done, and we're a bit different than the rest of the locations because we do international and local, and a lot of the other locations, they only focus on investing in the local startup ecosystem. Us having the ability of being able to do local and international is better because it gives a more diversified portfolio, and it also means that you have a greater learning curve because you get to learn as well from your fellow founders that are in the same cycle that are from all around the world. So we've invested in 50 startups for the Bahrain portfolio, and we've received applications from over 50 countries with over 1,000 hours of training done. They've raised $2.7 million to date, and we've had over 1,500 applications to the Bahrain program. So just an idea of how it works, we basically do initiatives like this where we have community engagement. We try and support the ecosystem and encourage startup, and we do that through education and workshops. And we do that locally and we do it internationally as well. And then we usually get around 300 startups or so that apply each cycle. And then we filter them down to around 70 that we interview. And then we select 20 ultimately that go into a boot camp, which is about a 4 to 5 day intensive training course where you'll cover a lot of the fundamentals of startup. And that's our way of preparing you so that on the 5th day, when you go to the selection committee, you are well prepared. And that's where it's sort of like, if any of you have seen Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, it's a very similar scenario. You'll pitch in front of about 4 or 5 judges, and then we tally our scores, and that's how we decide on the 6 or 7 that we invest in. The ones that we do invest in, we end up going into the acceleration program where you get invested in by us. Over here in Bahrain, it would be $32,000 that we invest in each company in exchange for 5 to 10% of the company. And then we go into a 4-month program where we spend 1 month at the beginning focusing on the product, making sure you're in the right direction. The next month goes into marketing and your go-to-market strategy. The 3rd month we go into growth, which is courses like financial modeling, but a bit more advanced than what would have occurred in Mahmoud's session, and also more in depth on how to deal with investors and how to raise funding. And then ultimately in the 4th month, it goes on to the demo day. Our demo days, I'd encourage all of you to watch them. You can learn a lot from the startups that have pitched at them. You can find that if you go on YouTube and you just type in FlatbLabs Bahrain, you'll find our YouTube channel, and all our demo days are documented on the YouTube channel. After the acceleration process is done, it's an ongoing relationship. We like to call ourselves the 3rd founder in the business. So it doesn't just end after the acceleration is done. We end up in meetings with these startups every month for the next 5 to 7 years usually. So just to give you an idea of how the Bahrain investment ecosystem works and what the landscape looks like, you have the ecosystem enablers, people of the likes of Startup Bahrain, Tamkeen, GDG, Manama, societies like the Unreal Development Group, they all play a role. And then you have the facilitators at the concept stage, which would be similar to the UOB incubator and CH9 and Brilliant Lab. And then when they get to the MVP stage and they have a prototype, that's where the accelerators come in. And so in Bahrain, you have FACEKI, you have Tenmu, and you have Brink. Tenmu is more direct investment. It's not an accelerator, but FACEKI and Brink are. We're sector agnostic. Brink is IoT orientated. And then what we do is we facilitate when it comes to the product development part and taking you into the market and raising funding so that you can get to here, which is the 4th stage, where you have the big VCs, which are the big investment companies like MEVP, Plus VC, Sharuk. And these are the guys where it usually takes about 18 months if you have a good product to be able to get the kind of traction where they would be ready to come and invest in you at a very significant amount. So let's move into the main objective of this session, which is communicating your business and pitching. So everyone has their own format of how to pitch, and everyone has a different reason towards why they think their format is right. Over the years, we've been doing this for over 10 years now, and we feel that this format is the most accurate one. So I'll just walk you through it, and then I'll explain the reasoning behind it. So for example, when you first start your pitch deck, and I want to make a differentiation, you have pitch decks and you have investor decks. Pitch decks are designed to be a lot more visual with less caption and text. And so the reason behind that is it's a visual sort of support mechanism to your narration. So the idea is that most of the information should be coming from your script, which is what you're going to be saying to the investors, and that your slides are just there to sort of support the point you're trying to make on each slide. Um, with an investor deck, naturally, those are created for investors to be able to get the full in-depth detail of your business without you having to be there to narrate it. So investor decks will usually be a lot more populated with script and caption. And so not usually as good to use when you're pitching live, but the perfect thing to use when you just want to send it over through email and let people read for themselves about your company. So today we're focusing on the visual one, which is the pitch deck. And what you want to do is you want to have a very simple opening slide. It's just going to be the first slide that includes your startup name, your logo, and any tagline, for example, the slogan. And usually you can put like your website address, for example, as well. And then the next slide is where you really start your pitch, right? Where you need to identify the problem in the mind of the investor. So you'll list the problem that you're trying to solve. You'll find that there are people that have different ways of doing this. Some of them go straight into describing the market and the issues that are faced in that market or that for that service. Or you get others that like to tell it more as a story where they will use a name, for example, like Yasmin or something of that nature. And they try and tell it through their personal experience of how they suffer by having friction within the process that their solution is trying to solve. So you always want to, the first thing you want to establish is that there is a problem and you want to make the problem extremely clear. And then after that, you'll move into the solution where you're going to present your product and show that it's the solution and the showcase of how it works, right? And so usually you'll be taking all the things that you've identified in the problem and saying, this is introducing our service and how we solve that problem. And usually what people will also do in the solution is sometimes if it's an app, for example, they'll show you the user journey. So they'll give you an idea of the exact experience you'll go through when you're using that product or service. Then after the solution, you're going to go into market size and the market opportunity. Now, the reason this is super important is that investors, it's not like they know everything there is to know about every single market. They might not understand the size of the market. And for them to stay tuned in throughout your pitch, they need to understand that there's money to be made, right? So everybody that you'll come across usually as an investor is in it to basically make a high multiple on their investment. And so they want to know that there's a decent market, addressable market there. And so with this, you need to do research. You need to figure out what are the key metrics to your market. You need to show the opportunity of that market. A lot of the times, you'll be talking on the market you're focusing on and then the market you want to scale into. So you'll talk about, say, the Bahrain market, and then you'll want to talk about, say, KSA, UAE, perhaps the GCC market, which is usually the natural progression you'll find for most companies that are based out of here. And so once you've identified the market size, you move to the revenue model. It can be called revenue model or monetization model. And so this is your way of saying, like, so we've clearly shown you there's a problem that exists, and we've proven that we know how to solve that problem. Now we've shown you that there's a big market to address for money to be made. And then the revenue model is for you to show them how are you going to make money out of that market. So is it that you're going to be a commission-based revenue model? If so, how much is the commission going to be? Similar to what you get with Telebot, where they take a commission on every single order. Or are you going to be a SaaS-based model where you're going to have a monthly recurring subscription? A lot of the times, SaaS models can be favored by investors because it's more sustainable and it doesn't fluctuate as much as commission models usually do, right? But the point is that you want to make it very clear how you monetize your product. Next, you want to go into competition. And the reason competition is super important is you'd be surprised how many people you meet that sort of jump the gun. So I've come across people all the time who they're trying to solve a problem that's sometimes already being solved, which is okay because sometimes there's still a lot of room in the market still. But then the biggest turnoff for an investor is that you don't know your market space. You don't understand the competitive landscape. So you always want to show that you know who your local competition is, and you know in detail, and you know who your regional competition is, and you know who the global competitors are. And you can clearly identify why you have a key advantage over those competitors, and you know what it is that they're doing, that you're not, and you're doing that they're not, basically. And after that, you want to establish a traction slide, right? So traction doesn't always work with some startups that are very early stage, but even if you're not revenue generating, you can still have traction. So for example, if I'm an aggregator platform that basically is offering people, let's just say it's a platform for you to fix your car, and I've aggregated all the different mechanics and garages in Bahrain. Say I onboarded 60 of those garages, that's already showing a milestone of traction, right? Like it says that I've already onboarded 60 vendors. And so that's a good thing. That creates positivity in the investor's mind. And so traction is more up to you on how you define the metrics that are important to your solution, to identify traction, but always try and identify it. So here we've listed revenues, number of active users, downloads, an engagement metric, partnerships created. All of these things fall under traction. After that, you want to go into milestones. So milestones, usually you want to focus a lot more on the future than the past. You might want to talk briefly about like, okay, we hit our MVP at this stage, and then we secured funding, maybe in 2020 in the third quarter. But then you want to give a good 18-month to 2-year forecast of where you're going. So it's sort of your milestones and your roadmap, they tie into one. So you want to show that, by next year, we want to be scaling into KSA. We're hoping to have had 300,000 active users by that time on board our platform. We want to localize into multiple languages. There's so many different things that you can show to make it clear to the investor that you understand exactly where you're going, and that you have a clear plan of how you're going to develop the product, how you're going to capture more of the market, and how you're going to scale across the market, right? So the final thing, usually in between milestones and team, there'll be an ask. But I haven't put it in here because this is more when it's super early. But what you could do is after milestones, you can have your ask, and your ask is basically usually financial. Sometimes it's more specific to the audience. Maybe the audience isn't investors, but you want the audience to download and try out your product. So there's always an ask that you can give. But for example, if it's financial, what you should do is you put your amount that you're looking to raise in funding, and then usually you'll want to show why are you raising, say for example, $100,000, and you'll say like 30% of it is for product development because we want to localize into a foreign country, and we want to say develop. If you're just web-based, maybe they'd say I want to develop an application as well. Or you want to talk about your recruitment and who it is you plan to recruit onto the team, and why say 40% of the budget is for HR costs, or marketing, and briefly describe what you'll do with that budget for the marketing. And that can all be put in one slide. And usually the way that I look is just a big sort of enlarged number of what you're raising, and then a pie chart to divide and segment the different allocations for what you'll be spending that money on. So with the last slide after that is your team. And the reason that you leave your team for last is that you want it to be clear in everyone's mind of like, we've built up this big pitch to get you to give us some financial support. And these are the guys that you can trust to take that money and to actually implement the plan, right? Like, so it's all good if you have a perfect pitch, but if you're not able to validate yourself as a person, why will they invest in you, right? Like, so at an early stage, everybody's investing in the person. There's obviously the part where they see that you've identified the market and that you have a good solution. But at the end of the day, it's all about the ability to be able to execute, and ultimately execution is going to all rely on individuals. So definitely people are the most important part in startup, and that's where you want to really be strategic in identifying the role that each member in your team plays, and how they bring on board valuable skills and experience to be able to address executing the plan that you've pitched to the investors. Finally, you want to go into the closing slide. The closing slide is where you'll have your logo, your contact details, your social media. You can ask people, you can do a call to action where you can ask people to visit your website or download your app. And then you pretty much finish it off with just thanking them for their time. And now I'm going to show you an example of a company, a Bahraini company called FACEKI. And so this is literally going to follow the format I just discussed. And then afterwards, I'm going to share a link. I was going to actually try and play the video on Zoom, but I've noticed that usually you get a bad frame rate and it'll be very jittery. So I prefer you all to go and watch it yourselves through the link on YouTube after this session is done, so that you can see it being performed live in action. And you'll also get to know their script. You'll see their script is very different from what's just written on the slide. So here's the opening slide. As we said, it would be very straightforward. A logo, a website. Now, immediately he started off on identifying a problem, right? So he's like, organizations are still struggling with fraud and account breaches, balancing security and user experience, customer onboarding process. The big question for organizations is the user who signed up for the service really who they claim to be? And now their introduction, right? Like, so they've identified the problem and they're like introducing FACEKI, here's the solution. So it's a digital biometric authentication, makes logins to accounts very simple. And it's been certified. They've, specifically with this kind of software, they had to get very high level certification to prove that it can't be spoofed, which means, for example, nobody with a picture could fool it. It has to be a real person that's taking the scan. And so here they go into list, you know, all the features of that solution. And then they sort of, in this part in the script, he walks you through the process where he shows how you would onboard, how you'd get your CPR uploaded as well. And it's all pretty much stored on the cloud. So the good thing about it being stored on the cloud is that most biometric authentications are right now being stored on handheld devices. So beyond your device, other platforms won't be able to identify you. With something like this, with a centralized database, it would mean that if you walk into the airport and they had this as an integration, they'd be able to onboard you, and they'd be able to check you in just from a camera seeing your face, for example. So after they've identified the solution, now they're going to the market. See, they put a 21% growth year over year in their market space, and that Bahrain's at 21 million, the GCC's at 810 million, and the MENA region's at $8.6 billion when it comes to the biometric authentication market. Over here, they've clearly stated how they make money. It's subscription based, and it's at 25 cents per user. So you can imagine, it seems like it's not much, but imagine a bank that has 300,000 people using it on a monthly basis, right? So here's their competitive landscape. You get different ways of doing this. This is one. Another one is that you get a Y and X axis where you'll identify the 4 main quadrants of that product and show where each startup lies within that. Or there's another one that would be similar to what you see on Amazon where you have product reviews, and it would just sort of be a list of features and then tick boxes of what you offer and what they offer. And so over here, you know, you can see that he's basically placed himself in the center between the login and authenticator platforms, the cloud-based facial recognition platforms, and the ones with built-in anti-spoofing detection. So a lot of the times you'll find that as a startup, you're always going to try and make yourself seem like you're the most centered. And it's just natural, right? Like, it's not always going to be the case, but it's where you want to be. And so over here, they're going into their milestones and their roadmap. They put that they've launched, they've got partnerships. and they're putting what they're working on right now. So the next is going into voice recognition. Their main target as a KPI and a milestone is to do 1 million verifications for facial recognition. And here's their ask. So they've asked for $200,000, and they made it very clear that they're putting 50% into product development. See, he would be pitching right now and narrating why, what's going into the product development. And the marketing is 25% and the operation is 25%. And as we said previously, now he goes into the details of the team, founder by founder, showing, look, he's one of the main things he's highlighted here is experience, because they all have quite a track record of experience. And he knows people will take them quite seriously based on their experience and their background. And so here he really tries to sell the team as much as he tries to sell the product, to make them believe that these are the guys that you can trust with $200,000 to be able to launch this product and to scale it. And then ultimately he ends it. Here he would have a call to action. Usually it would be to go visit the website or to download the product. He's put his email and he's put their social media taglines over here.